Welcome to your first project in the Advanced Illustrator class, guys. Well, I pulled open the first page, which, depending on when you're viewing this video, could be changed a little bit. But really want to talk about, what this project is and give you a quick summary of it. The bottom line is you see this old picture of me. I got a lot more grays now, but this is just an idea of a magazine layout that you're gonna use. The real goal is the portrait. This is an illustration class. It's all about the portrait, what I did is I wanted to purpose the portrait, so I put it inside of a magazine spread, because of the fact that you don't want somebody looking at your portfolio and saying, so is this what you expect, that you're going to make illustrations of everybody in the office? Because that's probably not going to happen. I mean, it might happen, but it could. But more likely you're going to be creating layouts, and this is just meant to be a supporting graphic, and you're trying to show off the fact that you can create supporting graphics like this. But for the first 2 weeks, we're going to have a lecture in class, as long as we're having in-class time, which, depending on the version of the class, it's going to be different. And week 3, that's when you're supposed to finish the project. Week 3, what I like to do is I like to have students submit early, give them some feedback, and then let them resubmit by Saturday over the weekend, or whatever due date it is at that point. I have to make these videos assuming that they might be used in other semesters. But I like to give students a chance to update their work. So I did want to point out the fact that I do provide resources aside from my own videos, and this is one of them. I mean, this is subject to change, but basically if you just click here, at least presently, you can see this course right here you can link to and you could watch, but you would have to be able to access LinkedIn Learning /lynda.com. It's a confusing mess, but the bottom line is all you need is to go into the Start Here folder, and you'll see directions on how to do that. And get a library card and enter your library information, and that's kind of how easy it is. The only thing that gets complicated is the fact that, well, I'm not even going to get into it. Watch the video on this. You'll watch the video on that, and you'll hear me complain. So I'll spare you any more complaining. Hopefully they get that sorted out. Okay. All right. So if you're not fresh, if you haven't taken this class recently, you really are going to need to freshen up a bit. So you could also use lynda.com for that. Watch the Essentials video for whatever version of Illustrator we're using in class right now. At the time of this video, it's 2019, and this video is being made fall 2019. So things could be different by the time you see this video. All right, I'm so tired of looking at myself. Let me show you an example of something that I created in a past semester. This is before the movie came out, but I made this guy for Endgame. And I want to talk to you about the process that I went through to create this guy. I've made a ton of different ones over the years, and in the classroom you'll probably see me making a different one as long as we have some classroom time. In fact, I might talk to you a little bit about what I'm thinking about doing in the class. But this is from a past semester. An important conversation to have is this, the subject that you're going to choose. You really just want their head and shoulders, and normally you're going to crop off part of their shoulders. You might just have their head, but what you don't want is you don't want their full body. This is supposed to be a portrait of somebody's face. And another thing that you want is you want a high resolution photograph, and you want a photograph that also has some dramatic lighting. As you can see, I'm going to click here so you can kind of get an idea. See the dark shadows and the bright highlights. If there aren't dark shadows and bright highlights, if the portrait is kind of blown out, that's a problem. Another thing to consider is the expression on the person's face, which can be kind of difficult. If you can find anger, if you can find sadness, if you can find some sort of emotion, it makes it a little bit more powerful. One thing I noticed in mine, which I've been planning to rebuild, I just look like I don't care, or that I'm kind of angry right there, and if I really leaned into it, then the graphics around me could sort of reflect that. Like if it was a person yelling, then you could have like a red background, or really work something into it. Or I guess this looks kind of professional to me, but also kind of like I'm determined to do something. I think I look like a creep, honestly, but whatever. This one right here that I chose for Robert Downey Jr., he just kind of looked like he's fancy. That's about it. He's not showing a ton of emotion either. I don't know why I do that to myself, but I like the submissions where you can create some emotion. Now, all my examples, other than the one of me, are actors, but the directions do suggest that, and I agree that you choose yourself as the subject. I think that's a great way to work, or somebody that you know. But it's either an actor or yourself. I really wouldn't do somebody that you know. I mean, you can, but here's my point. Picture yourself in an interview, right? And you're like, here's my vector portrait. I made all this in Illustrator, and hopefully you kept your reference and you're describing why you did what you did. If it's a portrait of you, it's something where where you could use it for social media purposes. They're going to recognize you in your portfolio book. And if it's an actor, especially if it's a famous actor and it's sort of somebody who's been around for the past 10, 20, 30 years, I try to pick classic, time-tested subject matter. There's a good chance people in your interview are going to recognize who that person is, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, you actually captured their look. If it's a stranger, they're not going to know. They're not going to be able to identify as much. The only situation where I really suggest using a stranger, or maybe high-resolution photograph of some stock art, is somebody who's showing some like serious emotion. I think that would be fine. But if they just have a blank stare on their face, I would ask you, why are you picking them as your subject, right? So let's go ahead and get technical for just a minute. I mean, this video, I'm not gonna dig real deep into anything but choosing your photograph and preparing it for you to be able to work with. So that's the focus of this video, other than a little bit of orientation. So I want you to take a look at this, and obviously you can just pick your photograph out. And in this case, I picked this photograph and I cut out the background. I'm going to spare you how to cut things out, because you already know. That's the prereq for this class. But basically, I cut this out, and you'll notice I did this with a pen tool. I was able to be a little bit sloppy. I didn't bother going crazy on the hair, because I know in Illustrator I'm going to sort that mess out. But I did go around here and cut out things pretty well. But I wasn't real strict, because it really doesn't matter, because I'm going to go around with the pen tool later, and these little edges aren't going to show up. But I cut them out so I could see the edge all the way around them. And then I wanted to add a little bit of drama to everything, so I started to work with adjustment layers. This one, I felt like he was a little washed out, so I added this adjustment layer to darken him a bit. And up here, as you can see, I added some highlights to his hair, make his hair a little bit more fun. And then I took his beard and burned it in a little bit. So all this was done with just using, I said levels, but I meant to say curves. So you can see I can go really dark on his beard. That looks ridiculous, but you get the idea. That's what I did. You might be like, but Eugene, it looks like he's got like an orange skin right there. Yeah, calm down. You're in control at this point. You have to imagine yourself. I'm sorry, I'm yelling at this hypothetical student, but at least it's not a real student. But don't worry about it. You're not gonna. You can think your way around that. And at the end, I guess I did something with the hue saturation. I'm not really even sure what I did. It doesn't look like I did anything. There's literally nothing done there. I have no idea why I added that. Well, I desaturated it a bit. Okay, fine. And then I made a merged copy of all that. So that's how I got to this phase that you see here. And this is one of my big tricks whenever I'm trying to get something ready to take it over into Illustrator. Check this out. This posterized adjustment layer, like if you get go down here to adjustment layers and you add posterize. You can get this guy and you can do this. So what I did, a couple steps to it, is I just set it to 4 levels, so you can see right there. They're my properties. And then I set the blend mode to luminosity. If I don't set it to luminosity, it looks like this mess right here. But if I set it to luminosity, I get this right there. And obviously if I take the levels up, I see a whole bunch of detail. But when I take the levels all the way down to a low level, like 3 or 4, 2 is a little much for me. But I mean, 2 would work. But if I take it up to 4, I liked that. And that's where I got a lot of my shadows at. And the shadows look really bumpy and nasty, and that's going to be the next thing I'm going to address. But again, you could dodge and burn at the beginning, or you could do whatever you want to create stronger contrast. I chose curves and worked on layer mask to strengthen up the contrast, and then afterwards I used posterize with luminosity turned on, the blend mode. Again, you don't have to do any of this. I used to not do any of it, but I got to admit, it really does help. So that's why I bothered to put that in, make a video on it and talk about it in class. So this looks like a mess. Let me talk to you about, I didn't do this before, obviously, but I do want to add into this that if you wanted to, you could add curves again at this point, and you could try to adjust things a little bit. Isn't that crazy? So what this is you could try to add to the drama, which I chose not to. But what I'm looking for is intelligent highlights and nice dark shadows, because those are going to be shapes that I'm going to map out and I'm going to chunk out later. So if I wanted more drama, I could have it. In fact, you know what? I'm going to create more drama. Why not? Why not? I feel like I want to do it. So again, this doesn't matter. It's just a quick example. Notice if I put it above posterize, I'm getting different effects than if I put it below. But let's say that I wanted some of these more dramatic highlights. Okay, well, they look like garbage. I'm sure you're noticing that. And you'll notice that I've got this layer. If I turn it on, you're seeing some changes happen. So let me show you how that happened. Let me delete this because I don't really need it. So this is another part where, you might want to take notes or pay attention right now. Because if you miss it, you'll be sad. But one way to overall smooth everything out so it doesn't look so chunky is to go up to the filter menu and then go to blur and then go to not Gaussian blur. That'll blur it. That'll blur all the edges. So make sure you don't do Gaussian blur because that's kind of everybody's default. Go to surface blur. Surface blur is really cool because what it does is it will actually maintain the hard edges, and it just takes the areas of continuous tone and it wants to blend and it wants to soften them. So it won't take any sharp edges away unless you make it do that. As you can see in my little preview right here, his eyelashes are fine, but what's changing is his actual skin because it all blends together. And this sort of works, but it doesn't work that well. You know what I mean? It works okay. I mean, you wouldn't want this crazy chunky shape, would you? So what I do is, I literally just ignore the chunks and I just kind of make a shape out. But what's something cool that I'm going to show you is you can actually do that inside of Photoshop before you take it in there if you want. The way you do it and the way I do it, there's different ways to do it. What I used to do is use the Smudge Tool to do this. See? So I could go in here and be like, let me smudge up this edge. And check that out. It starts to soften up that edge. So I'm literally just shaking it. Just shaking it. That's all I'm doing. And I can bring that shape in or I can bring that shape out, but I have some control over it, which is kind of cool. But I found another way a few years ago that I liked a little bit better, so let me share it with you. The other way, by the way, you'll notice I made a copy of this layer. I kind of did that without describing anything, but I try not to destroy anything because I don't want to destroy any of the original stuff. I even keep the reference photo separate out of this file. I want backups for my backups, and so do you. It makes life easier. All right, So if you go under brushes, there's a brush called the mixer brush. Okay, there's the mixer brush. And you want to set the mixer brush up so it doesn't pick up any color, because that'll mess things up. So basically, at this point, it'll sort of do what I want to do. I don't have to shake the edge or anything. I can just kind of go over this, and you can see it just softens it up, just like that. The brush itself, the default brush, works just fine for me. It's a soft edge brush, so it creates so it'll do what you're seeing here. You know, I can get rid of all this information I don't care to see. But again, I want to emphasize the fact that you're literally painting at this point. Don't think you're doing anything else. I mean, if you just went like this across his face, you're going to mess it up. So you're kind of determining what that chunk is going to look like, or what that mapped shape is going to look like. This highlight, which, you know, I'm not sure if I like it or not, but it doesn't take that much work. You can see right here. There we go. This is stuff, you know, like with the pen tool later on, I would probably be doing anyways. Again, this is not going to replace what we're trying to do with the pen tool. I mean, Photoshop cannot create that super clean look. I mean, I don't want to say Photoshop couldn't, but I mean, why bother? All right, so there's a nice little chunk. I can back out and I can see it, and you know, that's what that highlight looks like. You might see it like I am and be like, well, the highlight looks like too much, so you could start to move it in. And by the way, it doesn't have to be white either. You know, like it's white on here, but you could make it a lighter skin tone color. But you know, I'm starting to make this out, and I'm starting to see the different tones I'm going to work with here. Like here's 1, here's 2, here's 3. You know, it's a highlight here, which fades into a darker skin tone, which fades into a darker skin tone, which fades into a much darker skin tone right here. You know, this is making me familiar with what's happening here. And I want to say it again. This is stuff you could figure out, you know, in Illustrator. You don't have to do it in here, but doing it in here isn't that hard. You know, with this mixer brush right there, you see that you're going to spend hours in Illustrator anyways. So this is faster, at least to get a sense of, you know, what this is going to look like. Now I'm not going to do this whole thing, right? But this is giving you and I a sense of, you know, what we're going to do. Because obviously we're simplifying here. You know, that's our goal, is we're trying to simplify. All right, so this is going to look different than my little example that I showed you already in the video, because I changed the lighting. Now I'm not going to finish this. By the way, I use a little bit of logic here. You know, dark areas protrude, light areas recede. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I know his cheek is supposed to be coming out, and then this is the top of his cheek, and then it kind of fades back and around. Ignore my text messages, please. All right. So what do you do when you're done? By the way, you'll notice that I turned on this red background here, so I don't really need it. But what I did was I saved this as a PNG, and then I placed it into Illustrator, and I'll show you. So underneath everything, this is the way I had things set up for this. Yeah, basically, I always have two references, and this is inside of the layout. By the way, it's really important in the layout that whatever you pick, you have to kind of, I always say, toss the image in here first. Make sure it fits over here real nicely. You've always got to cut off a shoulder, because you need space over here. You know, if his whole body was moved over any further, this really wouldn't work. So you always need a subject that's boxy. You have to, you know, it's like buying furniture. You know, when you buy furniture, you definitely take into consideration the actual dimensions of the room, don't you? If you don't, you're crazy, right? Same thing where if you know you're going to be inside this 11 by 17 layout, then you need to pick somebody who's going to fit. So, I went to File, Place, and placed these guys in. And if they're linked images, you have to keep them with the file. And I did two things. I made them real big and took the opacity down, obviously. And then I took another photograph of him, and I used this to try and build up my color palette. This is as far as I went with simplifying his face. I skipped a few things. The eyes are really important, if their eyes are closed or if their eyes are too obscured, move on to the next photograph, okay? Move on to the next photo. Find somebody else. But I popped this in here, and then I just built this. Then I added the layout and all this other stuff later. We'll talk about that a little bit later, and how to create everything. But the bottom line is this. That's how I get my reference started. I'll show you the beginning of another process I'm going on. I was thinking about using Sophie Turner. I think I hated the end of Game of Thrones, by the way. I'm still so mad. But still respect this actress. It's fun getting to see her grow up. There's a whole bunch of cool images of her. I was looking and thinking about this one, and the reason is the eyes are pretty clear. They catch lights, the pupil, the iris, the cornea. Everything's right there. Looks good. And I've got some dramatic shadows on this side, some great highlights on that side. It's a decent resolution. That's why I'm looking at this. But there's a whole bunch of ones that I just ignored, that I just skipped past them on purpose. This one, her all dressed up and everything. I'm not saying it's a bad photograph or anything, but she's got some shadows, but there's not a whole lot of story to her. Her mouth's hanging open. I didn't think that she would even appreciate me using that one. She's a pretty girl and all, but there's a lot better photographs out there. This one right here is really dimly lit. See how darkly lit that is? The eyes are going to be obscured. This is more of a screenshot. By the way, if you're like really savvy with working with video, you can pause any movie you've ever seen and you can get a screenshot off of it, especially the Blu-ray stuff. That's where a lot of these are from. That's good lighting, but she kind of looks like she's distracted at school or something like that. I'm not sure I would want to use that one. This one I really considered. The contrast is too high on this one. That's why I didn't choose it, but it could have worked. It could work. But the resolution's kind of crappy. Even though it's big, look, it's fuzzy. And then I'm thinking about, like where she's going to be at on the page. Obviously, I can't have both shoulders here. This one probably would be a mess. In fact, one of the examples, I'll probably post it for you. I did do Kit Harington, Jon Snow a couple of semesters ago. But I always pick stuff that I sort of like. All right. So I hope that helps you understand how to at least get everything set up. I guess I'll toss this into the video. The fact that you need to go out here to weeks 1 through 3, assignments, and you got to download the Project1 template. This is the template. Make sure you read all this stuff. Read everything here. Again, there's going to be more videos coming out, but right now you can't start this assignment, the Project1, without picking your reference. So pick your reference, run it by me, send it to me in an email, let me know. If you're not, you don't want to pick a bad photograph and then be miserable the rest of the time you're working on this project. And again, I suggest taking a photograph of yourself. Many of you have taken, I have tons of students that took digital photography and are dual majoring since there's not a big difference in classes. If you're one of those students, or even if you're not, come on, take a portrait of yourself or take a portrait of somebody else showing some emotion, and use them in this one. It'll add to it. But if you do pick an actor, and like I always do, pick something that's timeless, pick something that's not just popular in the moment, but that's been popular for a long time, and it'll feel more relevant then if you, like, let's say you picked out something from Twilight and you had that in your portfolio, right? I mean, well, what's today's Twilight? I don't know. Whatever that is. Twilight was big, but it really didn't last that long. You know, it wasn't huge for that long. It was a couple of years. You pick out something or someone that's kind of timeless. You know, like an actor that's been around forever. Even if I know you're young and you're hip and you want to pick out somebody you think is going to be big later on, but they might end up being a loser. You know, when I was in my early 20s, I thought Tom Green was hilarious. He had his own show on MTV. He's still around, but he is not that famous, right? So, you know, I should have picked somebody that's been famous for a while, if you're going to pick somebody famous at all. All right, well, I'm tired of talking, so hopefully you found this video helpful. Thanks for listening.